The lunch rush at Golden Fork Buffet was in full swing. Plates clattered, customers chatted loudly, and the smell of grilled meat and fresh pastries filled the air. But outside the restaurant, a man in worn clothes stood quietly near the entrance. His name was James Whitmore, the owner of the entire buffet chain. Except today, no one would recognize him. For months, James had been hearing troubling complaints from customers. Some claimed they were treated poorly. Others said staff only respected guests who looked rich. A few reviews even mentioned people being turned away unfairly. James didn't want reports. He wanted the truth. So that morning, he put on old jeans, a faded jacket, and worn sneakers. He skipped shaving and put on a baseball cap to hide his face. Then he walked straight into his own restaurant. Inside, the buffet line was packed with customers loading their plates. But the moment James stepped in, a young hostess at the front desk looked him up and down. Her smile vanished. "Sir, are you here to eat?" she asked cautiously. "Yes," James said politely. "Just the buffet." She frowned. Before she could respond, the floor manager, Kyle, walked over. Kyle had been managing the restaurant for almost a year. James had hired him personally after seeing his impressive resume. Kyle glanced at James for half a second before whispering to the hostess. James could hear it clearly. "Tell him we're full." The hostess hesitated. "But we still have empty tables." Kyle shrugged. "Just do it." She turned back to James. "Sorry, sir. We're full today." James slowly looked around the restaurant. There were at least 10 empty tables. "Oh," he said calmly. "I don't mind waiting." Kyle stepped forward now, his tone less friendly. "Look, man, this buffet is expensive. Maybe try somewhere else." The words hung in the air. A few customers nearby glanced over. James stayed calm. "I can pay," he replied. Kyle laughed quietly. "Yeah, okay." Then he crossed his arms. "Listen, we don't allow people to hang around unless they're eating." "I said I want to eat." Kyle sighed in frustration. "Sir, you're making this difficult." James took a small step closer to the cashier counter. "I'd like one buffet, please." The cashier looked nervously at Kyle. Kyle shook his head. "Don't ring him up." Then he turned back to James. "You need to leave." James blinked slowly. "Are you kicking me out?" Kyle didn't hesitate. "Yes." Several customers had stopped eating now. One elderly woman at a nearby table whispered to her husband, "That's not right." But Kyle didn't care. "Security," he called toward the kitchen. A dishwasher peeked out from the back. "Walk him out." The young worker looked uncomfortable but stepped forward. James held up his hand. "No need." He reached into his jacket pocket. Kyle smirked. Finally taking the hint? Instead of leaving, James calmly pulled out a small leather card holder. He opened it, then placed a sleek black business card on the counter. The cashier leaned forward. Her eyes widened instantly. Kyle frowned. "What?" The cashier slowly turned the card toward him. The words were simple. James Whitmore, founder and owner. Kyle stared at it, then looked back at the man in front of him. The worn clothes suddenly didn't matter anymore. The restaurant fell silent. "Wait," Kyle said nervously. "You're—" "Yes," James replied calmly. "The man you just kicked out of his own buffet." A customer nearby gasped. Another pulled out their phone. Kyle's face turned pale. I didn't know." "That's the problem," James interrupted. His voice wasn't angry. It was worse. It was disappointed. "You shouldn't need to know who someone is before treating them with respect." The hostess looked like she wanted to disappear. The dishwasher slowly backed away. James continued, "I built this restaurant so everyone could enjoy good food without judgment." He gestured toward the dining room. "Families, workers, travelers, everyone." Then he looked directly at Kyle. But apparently that message didn't reach management. Kyle stammered. "I can explain." "You already did," James said. "Very clearly." The elderly woman stood up from her table. "I saw everything," she said. He was polite the whole time. Several other customers nodded. James turned back to the counter. "Here's what's going to happen." Kyle swallowed. Effective immediately, you are no longer the manager of this restaurant. Kyle's jaw dropped. But James raised a finger. You judged a customer by their appearance. He pointed toward the door. And you tried to throw him out. The restaurant stayed silent. James then turned to the hostess. What's your name? Emily, she said quietly. You hesitated earlier, James said. You knew something was wrong. She nodded slowly. Next week you begin training as assistant manager. Her eyes widened. Really? James smiled slightly. Good instincts deserve opportunity. Then he finally turned to the buffet line. Now, he grabbed a plate. I've been smelling that roasted chicken for 10 minutes. The tension in the room broke as a few customers laughed. James walked toward the buffet, but before he started serving himself, he turned back to the staff. And for the record, he lifted the plate slightly. Everyone deserves a seat at the table. The restaurant burst into applause. And that day at Golden Fork Buffet, every employee learned a lesson they would never forget. Because sometimes, the person you judge the fastest is the one who owns the entire place.